chair, 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 chair.
Morning and welcome to this YouTube exclusive. This YouTube exclusive, digging around this morning, looking at news articles and different things, and just so happened to come across supplemental bill, HR 815, come out of the Senate. I'm like, take a quick glance at it, look at the first couple pages, and it pissed me off right off the bat. I'm like, no, you know what? I'm going to have to do something about this. I'm going live. Screw it. We're doing this. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at all 370 pages of this bill. HR 815. To amend Title 38 United States Code to make certain improvements relating to the eligibility of veterans to receive reimbursement for emergency treatment furnished to the Veterans Community Care Program and other purposes. Amendment of the nature of the substitute intended to be proposed by Mrs. Murray for herself and Mr. Schumer. Strike all after enacting the clause, insert the following, Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as an Emergency National Security Supplement Appropriations Act of 2024. The table of contents in this act is as follows. Section 1, short title. Section 2, table of contents. Section 3, references. Kind of straightforward. Division A, National Security Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. And Division B, the Border Security and Combating Fentanyl Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. So, it's like, okay, this is going to be something of decent, whatever. That it should go well. And let's take a look at this real quick here. Division A, National Security Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2024. The following sums are appropriated out of any money of the Treasury not otherwise appropriated for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, and for other purposes, namely, for an additional amount of military personnel, Army, $207,158,000 to remain available until December 31st of 2024 to respond to the situation in Ukraine and for related expenses, provided that such amount is designated by the Congress as being for an emergency requirement pursuant to the Section 251 of the Balanced Budget of Emergency Deficit Act 1985. For the additional amount of military personnel, Marine Corps, $3,538,000 to remain available until December 31st of 2024 to respond to the situation in Ukraine. To respond to the situation in Ukraine, just like this last one was, to respond to the situation in Ukraine, 207 million, 3 million. What's this one? Oh, Air Force, 23 million. For the situation in Ukraine and for related expenses. For related expenses. For the situation in Ukraine, first and foremost, it is a little much. It's a little much. Why would we feel necessary to continuously fund Ukraine? I'm sick of us funding Ukraine. That's all we're doing, just funding Ukraine. Here you go. Space Force, 4,192,000. Respond to the situation in Ukraine. Operation and Maintenance Army, $4 billion $887,581,000 to remain available until December 31st to respond to the situation in Ukraine. This is what our Senate gives a fuck about. This is what they care about. Of all things for them to care about, this. Making sure that there's money allocated, billions allocated to respond to the situation in Ukraine. It's all they care about. They care zero about anything else that matters to about anything except for Ukraine. Operation and maintenance for the Navy, $1,534,163,000. Respond to the situation in Ukraine to support improvements for submarine industrial base. Improvements to the submarine industrial base and for related expenses. There's something a little extra in that one. Some kind of industrial base throwing millions and millions of dollars at all of this. Operation and maintenance costs for the Marine Corps, $69 million to remain available until December 31st, 2024. Allocate as much money as we want so that we can get what we want and you maybe can get what you want. Because remember, the other half of this bill is the border. This is the stuff that this is allocation of money for the situation in Ukraine is exactly what Democrats worried about. That's what they're worried about. That's the one thing. It's the one thing that they're like, oh, we really need to pay attention to this. Ukraine. Operation and maintenance for the Air Force, $869,000 to remain available until December 31st, 2024. To respond to the situation in Ukraine, provided that such amount is designated by the Congress for being an emergency requirement. Just like all of them have this bottom part. They all say the same thing after where they're, who they are, how much money they want, and for what reason it just so happens to be Ukraine and other related expenses. Operational maintenance for operation and maintenance defense wide. So everything, everywhere. 34,230,780,000 to remain available until December 31st. The total amount provided under the heading of the Act of $13,772,460,000. The numbers are so damn freaking long. It's ridiculous. To remain available until September 30th, 2025, shall be the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. Provided further that such funds of the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative shall be available for the Secretary of Defense under the same terms and conditions as are provided for under this heading of Additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2023, and shall be available notwithstanding Section 8135 of the Department of Defense Appropriations Act of 2023 for any similar provision in any act making appropriations for the Department of Defense. Provide further that the total amount provided under the heading of the act up to $4,400,000,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2025 may be transferred to accounts under the headings Operation and Maintenance, Procurement, Revolving and Management Funds for replacement through new procurement and repair existing unserviceable equipment of defense articles from the stocks of the Department of Defense and for reimbursement for defense services of the Department of Defense and military education and training provided and identified for provision of the government of Israel or to foreign countries to have provided support to Israel at the request of the United States, that up to $13,414,432,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2025, may be transferred to the same accounts of operation, maintenance, procurement, revolving management funds for replacement through new procurement and repair of the existing unserviceable equipment and defense article of stocks in the Department of Defense and reimbursement for the defense services in the Department of Defense and the military education and training provided to or identified for provision of the government of Ukraine or to foreign countries that have provided support to Ukraine at the request of the United States, that up to $1,900,000,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2025, may be transferred to an account with the same headings of operation, maintenance, procurement, or revolving and management funds for replacement through new procurement of repair existing unserviceable equipment of defense articles from the stocks of the Department of Defense and the reimbursement of defense services and Department of Defense and military education and training provided to identified for provisions of the government of Taiwan, that funds transferred pursuant to the proceedings of the three provisos shall be merged with and available for the same purposes and for the same time period of appropriations to which the funds are transferred. They're making sure that this isn't just Ukraine, Israel, this is also Taiwan. How many other countries do you think they actually have listed as places that they're going to continue to fund and need funds allocated out for the next year or two to be sure that they get what they want? And they're tying it to the same bill that covers our southern border. Procurement for the additional amount of missile procurement, $2,742,775,000 to remain available until September 30th of 2026. Okay, so let's add another year to it for the situation in Ukraine. Not like projecting this out and making it seem like that we're going to be there for the next few years. And that we need to have all this money, allocated out for each individual asset that we have out there, whether military asset that's out there from Army, Marine, Navy, Space Force. They're doing all of it. They're like, we need billions of dollars to remain available. We have that $6 billion to remain available until September 30th of 2026. $801 million shall be responded to the situation in Israel. $5,612,900,000 shall be to respond to the situation in Ukraine. Additional amount of other procurement Army, $308,991,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2026 to respond to the situation in Ukraine. That such amount is designated for the Congress from the emergency requirement. The additional amount of weapons procurement for the Navy is $706 million until 2026. Navy is shipbuilding and construction, $2 billion to remain available until 2028. They're really pushing the years out there. It's getting further and further out. And when it comes down to it, I think this is something of major importance that a lot of people are really seriously don't even know about. that the Senate is actually trying to push this bill through to support our southern border contains billions and billions of dollars, trillions of dollars. For support in almost any other area of the world when it comes to military aid. Could you imagine? We just went from a president that had 0 new wars started, a president that has picked up 5 awards, nominations, 5 nominations for Nobel Peace Prize for his Abraham Accords. But here we are, not even a few years later, under dictator Biden, telling us that we need billions, trillions of dollars to fund Ukraine. To fund Ukraine. It's amazing. It's amazing how ignorant this is. This really seriously is to think about. It's so disturbing that they're trying to slip this past us like it's nothing, and they're going to try to blame it on Republicans when it doesn't pass. You can say it's Republicans. The Republicans they're racist. They're racist because they want to close the border. This is Schumer's Democrats that are doing this. Provided that the total provided under the heading of the Act, funds shall be available as follows: Columbia-class submarine, $1,955,000,000. Virginia-class submarine, $200 million. Provided further that such amount of designated by the Congress as being the emergency requirement pursuant to Section 251 as the balanced budget of 1985. They're like, yeah, we're still running off that same balanced budget from 1985. We can't ever settle on anything that's of necessity without adding other procurement, Navy, $319,570,000 to remain available until September of 2026 for a situation in Ukraine. For the situation in Ukraine, over and over again, all these dollar amounts that you see, every single last one of these dollar amounts to the submarine, industrial base, and related expenses. For an additional amount of procurement, Marine Corps, $212 million to remain available until September 30th, 2026 to respond to the situation in Ukraine and related expenses. Ukraine Air Force, $366 million. Other procurement, Air Force, $2 billion for a situation in Ukraine. What's up, Nix? Top of the morning to you. Good to see you. For an additional amount for the procurement of defense-wide, $5,246,780,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2026, provided that the total amount provided under the heading of the Act for $1 billion shall be for the Secretary of Defense to provide the government of Israel for procurement of the Iron Dome and David Sling defense systems. That is total amount provided under the heading of $1,200,000,000 shall be for Secretary of Defense to provide the government of Israel with procurement of the Iron Beam defense system. The funds in the preceding provisos shall be transferred pursuant to the exchange of the letters and are in addition to the funds provided pursuant to the U.S.-Israel Iron Dome procurement agreement as amended, that Nothing under the heading of the act prior to the under the act shall be construed and apply to amounts made available to prior appropriations act in the procurement of the Iron Dome, David Sling, or the Iron Beam defense system. Green Badger Outdoors, good to see you. Good morning. Good morning to you. Just kind of going over HR 815, all the money that they're actually looking at pushing through. Not only for the security of the border, but something that's a little bit more than that. Just trillions and trillions of dollars being pushed to defense of Ukraine for the additional Model Defense Production Acts of another $331,200,000 expended for activities of the Department of Defense pursuant to the Section 108, 301, 302, 303 of the Defense Production Act of 1950, that such amounts shall be obligated and expended to the Secretary of Defense delegated necessary authorities conferred by the Defense Production Act of 1950, that such amount is designated to the Congress for being for an emergency requirement pursuant to Section 251 of the Balanced Budget Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985. There's all of them pretty much have that bottom clause on there. Research, development, testing, evaluation, more money for the Army for R&D as well as testing and evaluation through 2025. Navy's R&D, $20 million through 2025. The total amount provided under the heading of the Act of $13 million shall be responded to the situation in Ukraine. The $7 million shall support the payments of the submarine industrial base and for related expenses. Air Force, $406 million through 2025 for their R&D. It's so much money. It's freaking ridiculous. It's just no way that they're like, yep, we're going to get this passed. We're going to pass this. We're going to make this be, without so many people having an uproar on the millions, if not billions, of trillions of dollars for assistance to be held for Ukraine. What the fucking hell? Intelligence Community Management, $2 million to remain available until September 30th of 2024. General provisions upon determination of the Secretary of Defense that such action is necessary for the national interest, the Secretary may, for the approval of the Director of Office of Management and Budget, transfer up to $1 billion only between the appropriations of funds made available in this title to the Department of Defense to respond to the situation in Ukraine. They're like, we ain't leaving Ukraine. We're going to stay here forever. Not like anyone would need that money in your own country. No, none of us need any of these billions of trillions of dollars. Not at all. Zero of that money is really seriously necessary for us to even sustainably live, because, how is it all getting paid? Yeah, you bet right here. Our own tax money is paying for all this, and this is what they're allocating. This is something that not only will I not be able to pay off, or anybody else that's my age, but my grandkids and my great-grandkids are still going to be seeing this debt if this country still exists. If this country still exists, and only then, if this country still exists. The ridiculous amount of money is just that. It's tremendous. Section 102, not later than big if, yeah, right. Not later than 60 days after the date of enactment of the Act, the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the Secretary of State, shall submit a report of the Committees of Appropriations, Armed Services, and Foreign Affairs to the House of Representatives and the Committees on Appropriations, Armed Services, and Foreign Relations of the Senate on measures being taken to account for the United States defense articles designated for Ukraine since February 24th, 2022. Russian invasion in Ukraine, particularly measures that regard to such articles that require enhanced end-use monitoring, measures to ensure that such articles reach their intended recipients and are used for their intended purposes, and any other measures to promote accountability for the use of such articles. Go fuck yourself. You don't care about no accountability. They had no concern about accountability ever since February 24th of 2022. They threw accountability out the goddamn window. Nobody should believe anything that's coming out of this current government. We've been taken advantage of. They're taking us for all we've ever had. They're turning this country into an absolute shithole, and there's nothing that we can really seriously do about it. As sad as that is. Not later than 30 days after the date of enactment of the Act, and every 30 days thereafter through fiscal year 2025, the Secretary of Defense, in coordination with the Secretary of State, shall provide written report to the Committees of Appropriations, Armed Services, Foreign Affairs, and House Representatives, and the Committees of Appropriations, Armed Services, Foreign Relations, and Senate describing United States security assistance provided to Ukraine. These motherfuckers just like same goddamn sentence. For additional amount of Department of Defense of $2 billion. To who wants to guess? Who wants to guess where this money is going to be allocated for? Provided that none of the funds provided under this section may be obligated to expend 30 days. For Ukraine. It's so ridiculous how much money over and over each line, each one of these segments has a very, very large dollar amount. United States Indo-Pacific Command in fiscal year 2024. We're moving around just a little bit. It's not just in Ukraine. We got some stuff for Israel, got some stuff for Taiwan that we're going to be good on. We're going to be good on for the next couple of years, according to what they're trying to pass now. It's like, gee, I wonder why they're trying to pass such a massive bill now that would cover the next couple of years. Because if they can do it now, all of a sudden in a couple of years when it looks like things have changed hands, they can say, look what they did. This is Republicans did this. Republicans. It's always point the fingers at the Republicans. That upon transfer, the funds shall be merged with available same purposes or for the same time period of the appropriations and some transferred provided further. Blah, blah, blah. Title II, Department of Energy programs with an additional amount for science, in quotes, for science, $98 million to remain available until expended for acquisition, distribution, and equipment for development and production of medical, stable, and radioactive isotopes. Production of medical, stable, and radioactive isotopes. Science. Trademarking the word science. Atomic Energy Defense Activities, National Nuclear Security Administration, for an additional amount of defense nuclear non-proliferation, 143,915,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2025 to respond to the situation in Ukraine and for related expenses, provided that such amount is designated by the Congress as being for an emergency requirement pursuant to Section 251. Federal salaries and expenses. Federal salaries and expenses gets a $5,548,000 to remain available until September 30th of 2025 for the situation in Ukraine. Of the unobligated balances of the amounts previously appropriated under the heading Department of Energy, Energy Programs, Nuclear Energy, in Division J of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that were made available for fiscal years 2022, 2023, 2024 up to $2,720,000,000 shall be available in addition to the amounts otherwise available for necessary expenses to carry out the Nuclear Fuel Security Act of 2023, provided that insufficient obligated balances are available from such fiscal year 2022, 2023, 2024 amounts to fund a total amount for such purpose of up to $2,720,000,000, then up to $800 million for amounts previously appropriated. What the fucking? Who thinks that we have this much money? There's anybody out there that thinks the United States has this much money that they can afford any of this, please hit up chat and be like, yeah, right. They can afford it. This is nothing. This is nothing. They can afford whatever it is that you wish to throw at them. Receipts from the sale from the transfer of the Lu and Halo, or for any of the transactions, connections, the amount of repurposes transferred otherwise made available pursuant to the American Energy Independence Fund as discretionary outstanding collections and shall be available. They'll just print up more. That doesn't help anything. That helps zero things. That makes the dollar worth even less when you start printing more money. One of the most ridiculous things they did was to hand out money to United States citizens during particular times of things happening, and now all of a sudden you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, it's normal. It's normal. You just print more money. Bugs are free. So no need to pay for food. Therefore, you get disposable income, right? I ain't eating no goddamn bugs. And I will not be happy thinking that I will eat the bugs. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. These motherfuckers, they're trying to ruin the world. Amounts may not be repurposed or transferred pursuant to the section until a law is enacted and administrative action is taken or prohibit the limit of importation of Lu and Halo for the Russian Federation or by a Russian entity into the United States. The Nuclear Fuel Security Act of 2023, Section 3131 of the National Defense Authorization Act of fiscal year 2024 is amended, may not make commitments under the subsection, including cooperative agreements used in accordance with Section 6305 of Title 31, United States purchase agreements, guarantees, leases, service contracts, and any other type for the purchases or other acquisitions of the Halo and Lu, unless funds are specifically provided for the purposes of Advance Appropriations Act enacted under the date and enactment of this act. You own nothing and be happy, said Democrats. Democrats. Motherfuckers. Trying to take our shit. But we did print more. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Department of Homeland Security, Protection, Preparedness, Response, and Recovery, Federal Emergency Management Agency for an additional amount of federal agency management, agency operations, and support, $10 million to remain available until September 30th, 2027 for necessary expenses related to the administration of nonprofit security grants. You heard all the billions and trillions of dollars that I just rattled off that go to Ukraine, right? Here's the Federal Management Agency operations and support. Security grants. For an additional amount of Federal Emergency Management Agency federal assistance, $390 million, in which $160 million shall remain available until September 30th of 2024, and $230 million shall remain available until September 30th, 2026, for nonprofit security grant program under Section 2009 of the Homeland Security Act of 2002 for eligible nonprofit organizations to prepare for, protect against, or respond to acts of terrorism or other threats. But the open border is not an act of terrorism because he doesn't believe that it is. He thinks it's okay for it to be wide open. He thinks it's okay. He thinks there's nothing wrong with the matter of it being wide open. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. There's nothing to see here. Title IV, Department of Health and Human Services for an additional amount of refugee entrant assistance. $2 trillion, just kidding, $2,334,000,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2025 for refugee and entrant assistance activities authorized in Section 414 of the which makes sure that there's a whole ass ton of money available to all of those that don't live in the United States already. Among the states in the manner that accounts for the most current data available. Section 401, an additional Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act. Motherfuckers, get back to protecting the border. September 30th, 2023, inserting September 30th, 2024, provided that such amount is designated by Congress as being for an emergency requirement pursuant to the Section 250. They're like, if they don't use the money, we should write another clause that says if they don't use it, that it still goes to them. Because, you know, that way it works out best for nobody. For an additional amount of military construction, Navy, and Marine Corps, $281,914,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2028 to support improvements to the submarine industrial base and the related expenses, provided that not later than 60 days after the date of enactment of the Act, the Secretary of the Navy or their designee shall submit to the Committees of Appropriations. You can't spell Democrats without rats, right? We all know if we break down politics in itself, poly meaning many, and ticks meaning blood-sucking little, whatever, kind of really says a lot. Kind of really says a lot to how we look at politics. Damn Democrats, stupid ass Republicans. Republicans can't do shit. Democrats sit there and run roughshod all over everything because they're loud as fuck, trying to spend billions, if not trillions, of dollars. For an additional amount for diplomatic programs, $210 million to remain available until September 30th, 2025 for situations in Israel and Ukraine. $100 million to remain available until expended shall be in the worldwide security protection, including the response to the situation in Israel and areas impacted by the situation in Israel. Office Inspector General. For an additional amount to the Office of the Inspector General, $12 million to remain available till September 2025, provided that such amount be designated by the Congress as being for the emergency requirement pursuant to Section 251. Emergencies and diplomatic consular service, an additional amount to emergencies and diplomatic and consular services of $50 million to remain available until expanded to the unforeseen emergencies arising from diplomatic consular acts, provided that such amount be designated by Congress. Operating expenses for situations in Israel and Ukraine of $39 million. Designated for Congress should be an emergency requirement pursuant to 251 for an additional Office of Inspector General. $13 million to remain available. What does the Office of Inspector General need that much money for? Bilateral economic assistance funds appropriated to the President of International Disaster Assistance for an additional amount of international disaster assistance. $5,655 million to remain available until expended or address humanitarian needs in response to the situations in Israel and Ukraine. Transition initiatives, $25 million to remain available until expended for assistance to Ukraine and countries impacted by the situation in Ukraine. All of this damn money, so much money. Dude, like we can tuck a few more dollars into each and every single one of these clauses. We can all be rich. Economic support fund is $7,899 million to remain available until September 30th, 2025, provided that the total amount provided under the heading of the Act of $7,849 million shall be for assistance for Ukraine. For additional amount of assistance in Europe, Eurasia, and Central Asia, another $1.5 billion to remain available until 2025 for assistance. They really seriously think that they need to pass so many expensive bills for all of these countries is really seriously something that's needed? Look at that. Another $3,495 million for situations in Israel and Ukraine. International Narcotics Control and Law Enforcement, $375 million to remain available until September 30th of 2025. That a total amount provided under the heading of the Act of $300 million shall be for assistance for Ukraine and countries impacted in the situation in Ukraine. They're just like throwing money at Ukraine like it's nothing. It's okay. We can throw so much money at Ukraine and be just fine. No, we can't. We need to stop throwing money at Ukraine. For an additional amount of non-proliferation, anti-terrorism, demining-related programs, $100 million to remain available until September 30th for assistance in Ukraine and countries impacted by goings on in Ukraine. Peacekeeping operation, $10 million to remain available until September of 2025 for the United States contribution to the multinational force and observers mission to Sinai to enhance force protection capabilities. Foreign Military Finance Program, $7,100,000,000 to remain available to September 30th, 2025. 3.5 of that shall be for assistance for Israel. 769,300,000 shall be available for procurement of Israel and defense articles and defense services. Just throw a bunch of money, another 2, another 1.6 at places like Ukraine, Taiwan, the Indo-Pacific. That's not Taiwan. I suppose that's more of a dealings with places like Yemen and all of them, the Iranian-backed terrorist organizations of Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. We'll gotta get so much money through the laundry before the next administration. The next administration might not be friendly. I think we can kind of guess where this next administration might just end up. One place or the other, and I don't know what everybody's personal thoughts are to the Orange Man or anybody else for that matter, but I really don't see as the pedal sniffer to actually be the person that's an answer to any kind of question other than who poops their pants the most. I really find it severely difficult to believe that even Never Nikki would be a good answer. Seriously, there's so many people that are doing so many things, and it scares me across the board. It scares me across the board to no end. I could not imagine that this is our future. This is our future of where our money is going. When we see billions and trillions of dollars just being allocated, it's allocated. It's okay. It's okay. Once it's allocated, it's good for the next 2, 3, 4 years. The next time we need to pass another bill, it won't look so bad. It won't look so bad because, yeah, right. Every single time they pass another bill with more and more billions and trillions of dollars, and they get away with it, it allows them to continue to do it over and over again, almost anywhere that they wish. Another war breaks out, they're like, we'll just throw some money at that too. It's not free. It's not free. What was this one? During the fiscal year 2024, up to $250 million in funds deposited to the consular and border security programs account for a fiscal year that are available to be obligation may be transferred to and merged with funds appropriated by any act making appropriations in Department of State, Foreign Operations, and related programs under the heading Diplomatic Programs and Emergencies and Diplomatic Consular Services for emergency evacuations or to prevent or respond to security situations and related requirements, provided that such transfer authority is in addition to any other transfer authority provided by law, and any such transfer are subject to prior consultation with the regular notification procedures of the Committees of Appropriations. During the fiscal year 2024, Section 506 of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 shall be applied by the substituting $7.8 billion for $100 million. During fiscal year 2024, Section 506 of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 shall be applied to the substituting $400 million for $200 million In the matter of preceded clauses sustaining 150 million for 75 million in clause I. What the fuck? They like up all the clauses, make everything. We need more money. Need more fun, more money directed at locations, at things that have never been this way before. So that way they can never do this to us ever again, and cut them out of being able to fund such things as Ukraine and the assistance of Israel. In paragraph of subsection A, paragraph 2, subsection A, by striking armor and all that follows through the end of the paragraph and inserting defense articles that are in the inventory of the Department of Defense as of date of transfer are intended for use to the reserve stocks for Israel and located in the stockpile for Israel as the date of transfer. Reserve stockpiles, unobligated balances, and the amount of appropriated in prior acts under the heading multilateral assistance to international financial situations, contribution to international monetary fund facilities, and trust funds shall be available to cover the cost as defined in Section 502 of the Congressional Budget Act, 1974. Loans made by the Secretary of Treasury only to the Poverty Reduction and the Growth Trust and International Monetary Fund, following consultation of the appropriate congressional committees, provided that such funds shall be available to subsidize gross obligations for the principal amount of direct loans not to exceed 21 trillion in an aggregate. No, never mind. It's still billion. 21 billion. And aggregate, and the Secretary of Treasury is authorized to make such loans. It's such a ridiculous amount of money. I can't even wrap my head around how much money they're allocating for all of these different services and places and plans for Ukraine. It's all for Ukraine. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna waste our money on Ukraine. None of the funds appropriated and otherwise made available by the title of the Act may be made available for assistance to the governments of the Russian Federation or Belarus, including entities owned or controlled by such governments. Section 2606 of the Ukraine Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2022, in subsection A, by striking the North Atlantic Treaty Organization allies and inserting NATO allies, major non-NATO allies in the Indo-Pacific region, by striking 4 billion and inserting 8 billion, and by striking except that such rate may not be less than the prevailing interest rate of the marketable treasury. There's so much money. And NATO and non-NATO allies. Because why? Because they were told straight out, don't be moving yourself around the world thinking that you can take and make NATO larger than what NATO needs to be. You go and you try moving any further into Asia than you already are. They don't want you there. They don't want you there. They said to stay out of Asia. And, we're kind of already there. There's one country in particular that's in NATO that just so happens to be right on that border. Right on the border of what they consider Europe and Asia. So, as far as that goes, not to move any further. Like, don't come near us. They don't want us near them. They don't want NATO anywhere near them. This is so bad. So much money. The Secretary of State shall certify the report of appropriate congressional committees not later than March 1st, 2024, that oversight policies, processes, procedures have been established by the Department of State, United States Agency for International Development as appropriate and are in use to prevent the diversion, misuse, and destruction of assistance, including through international organizations, to Hamas and other terrorist and extremist entities in Gaza, and such policies, processes, and procedures have been developed in coordination with the bilateral, multilateral donors of the government of Israel. Oversight policy and procedures, the Secretary of State and USAID administrators shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees concurrent with the submission of the certification required for subsection A written description of the oversight policies, processes, and procedures for funds appropriated by this title that are made available for assistance for Gaza, including specific actions to be taken should such assistance be diverted, misused, or destroyed, and the role of Israel in the oversight of such assistance. Requirement to inform the Secretary of State and USAID Administrator shall promptly inform the appropriate congressional committees of each instance in which funds appropriated by the title that are made available for assistance for Gaza have been diverted, misused, or destroyed, to include the type of assistance, a description of the incident and parties involved, and an explanation of the responses of the Department of State or USAID as appropriate. Third-party monitoring funds, we're at page 53 out of 370. Easy way to get me to skip through this any faster? Donate. I get 350 other reasons why I shouldn't read this. I might not finish it. Just saying. Of the funds appropriated by the title under the heading Offices Inspector General of the Department of State, $7 million shall be made available. The oversight and monitoring and assistance made available for Gaza by the title of prior acts making appropriations for the development or the Department of State Foreign Operations and Related Programs, United States Agency for International Development of the funds appropriated by the title under the heading Office of the Inspector General of USAID, $3 million shall be made available for the oversight and monitoring of assistance made available for Gaza by the title in the prior acts making appropriations for the Department of State, Foreign Operations and Related Programs, not later than 90 days after the initial obligation of funds appropriated by the title that are made available for assistance for Gaza in every 90 days thereafter until all such funds are expended. The Secretary of State and the USAID Administrator shall jointly submit to the appropriate congressional committees to report and detailing of the amount or purpose of such assistance provided during such respective quarter, including the description of a specific entity implementing such assistance. Not later than 90 days after the date of enactment of the act of every 90 days thereafter, until September 30th, 2025, the Secretary of State, in consultation with the Director of National Intelligence and other heads of elements in the intelligence community that the Secretary considers relevant, shall submit to the appropriate congressional committees a report assessing whether funds appropriated by the title is made available for assistance in the West Bank and Gaza have been diverted by Hamas and other terrorist and extremist entities in the West Bank and Gaza, provided that such report shall include details of the amount of how such funds were made available and used by such entities, provided further that such report may be submitted in classified form. Consultation not later than 30 days after the date of enactment of the Act, but prior to the initial obligation of the funds made available by the title of Humanitarian Assistance for Gaza, Secretary of State and USAID Administrator, as appropriate, shall consult with the committees and appropriations for the amount and anticipated use of such funds. Section 616, prior to the initial obligation of the funds made available to the title of the Act, the Secretary of State, USAID Administrator, and Secretary of Treasury, as appropriate, shall submit to the committees on appropriations spend plans is defined in Section 7034 of the Department of State Foreign Operations and Related Programs Appropriations Act 2023 at the country account and the program level of funds appropriated by this act under the heading Economic Support Fund, Transition Initiatives, Assistance for Europe, Eurasia and Central Asia, International Narcotics Control and Law Enforcement, Non-Proliferation, Anti-Terrorism, demining and related programs, peacekeeping operations, foreign military finance programs, and contributions to International Development Association, provided that the submitted pursuant to the paragraph in such a program notified that total funding made available for such program be an account for a fiscal year. They just want money. They just want money. General provisions of this act. Each amount appropriated for made available by this act is in addition to amounts otherwise appropriated for the fiscal year involved. Is in addition, over and above anything that was already going to be involved. They're like, this will be more. This will be more. No part of any appropriations contained in the act shall remain available or obligation beyond the current fiscal year unless expressly so provided herein. Unless otherwise provided by this act, the additional amounts appropriated by this act to appropriations accounts shall be available under the authorities and conditions of applicable to such appropriations accounts of the fiscal year 2024, not later than 45 days after the date of enactment of the Act. The Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defense, in consultation with the heads of other relevant federal agencies and as appropriate, shall submit to the Committees of Appropriations, Armed Services, and Foreign Relations, to the Senate Committees and the Appropriations, Armed Services, Foreign Affairs, and House Representatives a strategy regarding United States support for Ukraine against aggression by the Russian Federation, provided that such strategy shall be multi-year, establish specific and achievable objectives, define and prioritize United States national security interests, and include the metrics to be used to measure progress as achieving such objectives. Provided further that such strategy shall include an estimate of the fiscal year by fiscal year basis of the resources required by the United States to achieve such objectives, including to help hasten Ukrainian victory against Russia's invasion forces in the manner such favorable to the United States interests and objectives. They really seriously think that that's going to be a deal? That's going to be a deal? That Ukraine's really going to be victorious? All the things that I've looked at seriously do not point at Ukraine being victorious. The United States and every other country that's part of NATO has been wasting their money for the last how long, and there's nothing that we can do to actually stop it or fix it. It's done. It's over with. They wish to continue to move forward as they see their operation that they have is working for them in their own back pocket, that they're going to continue to push it the way it is, the way they see it. I'm just kind of skimmed through a bunch of Such strategy shall include information in support of the government of the Russian Federation from the Islamic Republic of Iran, the People's Republic of China, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, related to the Russian campaign in Ukraine and its impact on such strategy, that such strategy shall be updated not less than quarterly, as appropriate until September 30th of 2025, and such updates shall be submitted to such committees, provided further that unless otherwise specified by this section, Such strategies shall be submitted in unclassified form, but may include a classified annex. Not later than 45 days after the date of the enactment of the Act, the Secretary of State, in consultation with the heads of other relevant federal agencies, as appropriate, shall brief the appropriate congressional committees in classified form, if necessary, in the status of welfare hostages being held in Gaza. For purposes of this section, the term appropriate congressional committees means the following: the Committees of Appropriations, Armed Services, and Foreign Relations of the Senate, the Select Committee of Intelligence in the Senate, the Committees of Appropriations, Armed Services, and Foreign Affairs of the House of Representatives, the Permanent Select Committee of Intelligence in the House of Representatives. Section 706, funds appropriated to the Division B of the Act of the Foreign Assistance for the Department of State for the broadcast and subject provision of the United States Agency for Global Media and for intelligence and intelligence-related activities are deemed to be specifically authorized by the Congress for the purposes of Section 10 of Public Laws 91-672, Section 15 of the State Department Basic Authorities Act 1956, Section 313 of the Foreign Relations Authorization Act, fiscal year 1994-1995, and Section 504 of the National Security Act of 1947. Let's just pull up a bunch of archaic laws and, throw them in there. Each amount designated to the Act of Congress as being an emergency requirement pursuant to Section 251. Says the same. Division B, Border Security and Combating Fentanyl Supplement Appropriations Act of 2024. Let's see how close this actually comes to being about the same, because I doubt it's going to be anywhere near that. 440 to remain available until 440 million until September 30th of 2026, provided that the total amount provided under the heading of the Act of 404 million shall be for immigration judge teams, including appropriate attorneys, law clerks, paralegals, court administrators, and other support staff, as well as necessary court and adjudicatory costs of $36 million shall be for representation of certain incompetent adults of the Immigration and Nationality Act, that not more than 3% of the funds available for representation for certain incompetent adults in the preceding proviso shall be available for necessary administrative expenses, provided further that there's exception of. They kept using the word intelligence, waiting for proof of sign of life. Judge is appointed pursuant to Section 1003.10 of the Title 8 Code Federal Regulations. Amount provided under the heading of the Act of Immigration Judge Teams may not be used to increase the number of permanent positions. Yes, no permanent positions, temporary ones only. Makes it easier to get rid of you later. Salaries and expenses of general legal activities for an additional amount of salaries and expenses of general legal activities of $11,800,000 to remain available until September 30th of 2026. Marshal Service and Federal Prisoner Detention. United States Marshal Service and Federal Prisoner Detention gets $210 million to remain available until expended for detention costs due to the enforcement activities along the southern and northern borders. Southern and northern borders. You come across any border, you get arrested. Federal Bureau of Investigation salaries and expenses. Federal Bureau of Investigation salaries and expenses are $204 million to remain available until September 30th of 2026 for expenses related to the DNA samples, including those samples collected by migrants detained in the United States Border Patrol, provided that such amount is designated by the Congress as being for an emergency requirement pursuant to the Section 251. Drug Enforcement Administration. For an additional amount of Drug Enforcement Administration salaries and expenses, $23,200,000 to remain available until September 30th of 2026 to enhance the laboratory analysis of illicit fentanyl samples to trace illicit fentanyl supplies back to the manufacturers, to support Operation Overdrive, and to bolster criminal drug network targeting efforts through the data system improvements, provided that such amount is designated by the Congress as being an emergency requirement pursuant to the Section 251 of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985. They really like that Control Act. Title II, Department of Homeland Security, Departmental Management, Intelligence, Situational Awareness, and Oversight. There's that intelligence word all over again. For an additional amount of Office, Secretary, and Executive Management, Operations, and Support, $33 million to remain available until September 30th, 2026, in which $30 million shall be necessary expenses relating to monitoring, recording, and analyzing, public reporting on, or projecting migration flows, and the impacts policy changes and funding have on following the related resources. I really seriously, when it comes down to it, I don't care about this money that they want to try releasing to the southern border to try preventing whatever it is that they're not really trying to prevent anyway. It really seriously find it really difficult to give a shit. I really do. I mean, really? Don't sign the bill. I'm with you. Don't sign the bill. The second that you sign the bill, you're bending the knee to the Democrats. You're allowing them to spend billions, if not trillions, of dollars on Ukraine and other foreign countries that don't need it. They don't need it. $3 million shall be for the Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman for reporting and oversight relating to expended detention capacity, provided that such amount be designated by the Congress as being for an emergency requirement pursuant to the Section 251. U.S. Customs and Border Protection Operations and Support, $6 billion. $8,479,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2026. That the total amount provided under the heading of the Act of $3,860,363,000 shall be operational requirement relating to the migration surges along the southwest border, counter fentanyl activities, necessary expenses, ports of entry, reimbursement to the Department of Defense and Border Operations Support, and other related expenses, of which $3,148,262,000 shall remain available until September 30th, 2024. $584,116,000 shall be for hiring U.S. Customs and Border Protection personnel. $139 million shall be for overtime costs of U.S. Border Patrol. $25 million shall be for familial DNA testing, and $1.4 billion shall be transferred to the Federal Emergency Management Agency federal assistance to support shelter and related activities provided by the non-federal entities through the shelter and service programs. And then that clause, for an additional amount for U.S. Customs and Border Protection procurement, construction, and improvement, $758,500,000 to remain available until September 2026. The total amount provided under the heading of the Act of $424,500,000 shall be for acquisition and development of non-intrusive inspection technology. $260 million shall be for the acquisition and development of border security technology, and $74 million shall be for acquisition and deployment of air assets. They need all this money to actually open to leave the border open. Are they really seriously saying that if they had all this money that they would go ahead and close the damn thing? Because I really fucking doubt it. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Operations and Support $7,600,833,000 to remain available until September 30th, 2026, provided that the total amount provided under the heading of the Act at $3,230,648,000 shall be increased custodial detention capacity. 2.5 billion shall be for increased removal flights and related activities, including short-term staging facilities. 534,682,000 shall be for hiring U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement personnel. 1,287,000,000 shall be for increased enrollment capabilities and related activities within alternatives of the detention program, provided further that such amount be designated by the Congress as being for an emergency requirement pursuant to the action of Section 251. Protection, preparedness, response, and recovery. We're seriously only page 69 out of 370. And we've already spent more millions and billions and trillions of dollars than anyone would ever have expected was actually going to be spent on anything and everything that they possibly can, whether it be Ukraine or our southern border. Citizenship, Immigration Services, Operations and Support, U.S. Citizenship, Immigration, just a small number, 3,995,000,000 until 2026. Just small numbers. Federal Law Enforcement Training Center Operations and Support, 50 million to remain available until September 30th. Law Enforcement Training Centers Procurement, Construction, and Improvement, 6 million to remain available until September 30th, 2026. But yeah, you see county jails that are older than snot. Are they releasing any of that money to those county jails so that they can update their lead-based paint or anything? I mean, just saying. Just saying. How ridiculous are we? Jesus. 170 million, 47 million, 25 million, 7.5 million, 10 million. Just each one of these lines have more and more money being allocated. Just so happens that they can't pass one without the other when it comes to the southern border versus Ukraine, or any other country for that matter, that we're currently at war with. It's very disturbing. It's very disturbing. And how many people you think will talk about this, will read? Even the 75 pages that I went through. On the ridiculousness of how they're treating our southern border. It's very horrible. One of the worst things ever. House of Representatives and Senate an additional miles of pedestrian and physical barriers where no such barriers exist, prioritized by operational requirements, development, and coordination of U.S. Border Patrol leadership, provided further that within 180 days of the date of enactment of the Act, Secretary shall submit a report to the Committee's Appropriations. 3. You, me, and GBO. So you think that there's somebody else that's going to read this? I doubt the government even reads this. I really seriously, I mean, I get it. I get what you're saying. The three of us potentially. It says that there's only one watching. I'm assuming that's you. I mean, I could be wrong. GBO could still be with us, and and the number could be wrong. As I'm not one watching. It has to be you. Has to be you. The director shall also provide the committees of appropriations, the House of Representatives, and the Senate data detailing the number of voluntary reparations coordinated by the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the costs associated with each reparation, the number of individuals by nationality, the average length of time by nationality between that when the individual was removed and when the individual's final order of removal was issued, the number of individuals that have opted into the program still awaiting reparations. Section 207, not later than 30 days after the date of enactment and active weekly thereafter, the Director of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement shall provide the committee's appropriations of the House of Representatives and the Senate a plan to increase custodial detention capacity using the funds provided for such a purpose in the title of this act until such funds are expended. Can't find that X to doubt in my controller. I know, right? The plan required by subsection A shall also include data of all detention capacity in which the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has access, but cannot use. The reason that the capacity cannot be used, and of course the action of mitigating utilization issues, the director shall provide a notice to the committees of appropriations of the House of Representatives at the Senate in the plan required by subsection A of the plan facility acquisition cost data utilization rates, increase the average daily population, and notice of the termination and reduction of the contract for the detention space. Whether such actions are funded by this act or any other act for this or prior fiscal years, the director shall notify the Committee of Appropriations in the House of Representatives and the Senate not less than 30 days prior to the planned date of the contract termination, the implementation and reduction of detention capacity. None of the funds provided by the title of the Act and U.S. Immigration Customs Enforcement operation support may be used for community-based residential facilities. Prior to the Secretary of Homeland Security requesting assistance from the Department of Defense for border security operations, the Secretary shall ensure that an alternatives analysis and cost-benefit analysis is conducted that includes data on the cost effectiveness of obtaining such assistance from the Department of Defense in lieu of other options. The Secretary shall submit to committees on appropriations and House of Representatives and the Senate a report detailing the types of support sought by the Secretary and any requests for assistance from the Department of Defense by such requests of the Department of Homeland Security within 30 days of the date of enactment of the Act and quarterly thereafter. The Secretary shall include in the data requested in subsection B the results of the alternatives analysis and cost-benefit analysis required under subsection A, section 210, eligibility for funding made available by the title of this act for transfer from U.S. Customs to Border Protection Operations and Support to Federal Emergency Management Agency federal assistance for the Shelter and Services Program shall not be limited to entities that previously received or applied for funding for the Shelter Services Program of the Emergency Food and Shelter Humanitarian Program. Section 211 of the total amount provided under the heading U.S. Customs and Border Protection Operations and Support in this title of this act are for transfer to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Federal Assistance and Sheltering Services Program, not more than $933,333,333 shall be available for transfer immediately upon enactment of this act. The additional $350 million shall be available for transfer under submission of the written certification of the Secretary of Homeland Security to the Committee's Appropriations in the House of Representatives and the Senate that the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement has the ability to detain 46,500 individuals and has increased the total number of enforcement and removal operations deportation officers by 200 above the current on board levels at the date of enactment of the acts, increased the total number of U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers by 200 above the current on board levels as of the date of enactment of the act, increased the total number of U.S. citizenship and immigration services asylum officers by 800 above the current on board levels as of the date of enactment of this act. An additional 116,666,667 shall be available for transfer upon submission of the written certification by the Secretary of Homeland Security to the committees of so much fucking money. Can't find the next to doubt. I know. It's too bad. It's too bad. Chat rate's really low. Of course it is. 28 views. Could use more views. Could use more views for sure. It's not showing like count. It's not showing the like count. If you can do me a favor, smash the like button for me. That'd be awesome. Conducted a total of 1,500 removal flights since the date of enactment of the Act and ensured that at least 75% of the Border Patrol agents assigned to duty along the southwest land border have been trained on the procedures included in Sections 235B and 244B of the Immigration and Nationality Act. What's the training that they need? If it doesn't matter who it is, let them across because it doesn't matter. As long as they say the word asylum, all's good. Title III, Department of Health and Human Services. I already did. It's YouTube. Need to refresh. On the studio side, it's buggy. I just did, and that's the problem. It's still not showing. There's something that's happening with YouTube's metric counter or whatever. It's just not right. I don't know what the problem really seriously is. Oh, if I zoom really far out, it's actually showing 10 likes. Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for donating to the cause. Those like buttons really do matter. They really do. Just refresh and jump from 4 to 10. Yeah. For an additional amount of refugee and entrant assistance, $350 million to remain available until expended for carrying out Section 235 of the Wilberforce Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2008. William Wilberforce. That the purposes of carrying out such section of the Secretary of Health and Human Services may use the amounts made available under this heading on this act to award grants to or enter into contracts with public, private, or nonprofit organizations, including states, provided further that such amount be designated by the Congress as being for an emergency requirement pursuant to the section of 251 of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985. Title IV, Department of State and related agencies, bilateral economic assistance, funds appropriated to the President, International Disaster Assistance, $850 million to remain available until expended to address humanitarian needs in the Western Hemisphere, provided that such amount is designated by the Congress as being an emergency requirement for the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere, because we've already sent it enough money over to the Eastern Hemisphere that when it comes down to the Western Hemisphere, we should definitely make sure that there's money in place. Because there's places like Venezuela that are going ahead and trying to create war fronts of their own. As they're like, what? Wait, there's what in the mountains? Oh, those are ours. Those are our mountains. Those aren't part of Guyana. No. Economic Support Fund of $415 million to remain available until September 30th of 2026. The total amount available under the heading of the Act of $230 million shall be made available to increase foreign country capacity to accept and integrate returned and removed individuals, which shall be administered by the consultation with the Secretary of Homeland Security, including and address partnered government requests that enable the achievement for the objectives as appropriate, provided further that the total amount made available under the heading in the Act of $185 million shall be made available to reduce irregular migration within the Western Hemisphere. Shall be made available to reduce irregular migration? Like all this has been super regular. All these millions of people coming across the border within the last 3 years. No big deal. No big deal. The fuck? You kidding me right now? Makes no sense. Makes no sense whatsoever. International Security Assistance, Department of State, International Narcotics Control, and law enforcement for the additional amount of international narcotics control law enforcement of $225 million to remain available until September 30th of 2025 to counter the flow of fentanyl precursors, and the synthetic drugs into the United States following consultation of the Committees of Appropriations. Section 501, such amount appropriated for made available to this act in addition to the amount otherwise appropriated for fiscal year involved. Section 502, no part of any appropriation contained in this act shall remain available for obligation beyond the current fiscal year unless expressly so provided herein. Unless otherwise provided for by the act, the additional amounts appropriated by the active appropriations account shall be available under the authorities and conditions applicable to such appropriations accounts of fiscal year 2024. Each amount designated in this act by the Congress as being an emergency requirement pursuant to Section 251 of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985 shall be available only if the President subsequently so designates all such amounts and transmits such designation to Congress. Any amount appropriated by this act designated by Congress is the emergency requirement pursuant to the Section 251. That same paragraph they like to throw at us. End of each one of them. Division C, Border Act. This division may be cited as the Border Act. The table of contents of the division as follows. Only on page 90, and they're like here, which throw all of this at you. USCIS Direct Hire Authority, ICE Direct Hire, Reemployment of Civilian, Establishment of Special Pay Rate for Asylum Officers, hiring flexibility, supplemental commissioners authority and definitions, alternatives to detention improvements, training for the U.S. Border Patrol, electronic notice to appear, authority to prepare the issued notice to appear, provisional non-custodial removal proceedings, protection merits removal proceedings, voluntary departure, non-custodial processing, withdrawal of application for admission, voluntary repetition, immigration examinations, fee account, border reforms, and protection appellate board. Jesus. There's an awful lot of sections in here. Other matters, 10-year statute and limitations of violations of sanctions, classified report to the Staffing Office of Foreign Asset Control, report of drug transportation routes and vessels and mislabeled cargo, report on actions Republic of China with respect to the persons involved in fentanyl supply chain. Designation of illicit fentanyl transactions, treatment of transnational criminal organizations and suspicious transactions reported of financial crimes, report on trade-based money laundering in trade with Mexico and the People's Republic of China and Burma. And you better watch out. You cut yourself on that one. Exceptions relating to importation of goods, definitions, supporting Afghan allies outside the United States, conditional permanent resident status of eligible individuals. So much money being pushed at so many different things. Afghans, supportive allies, employment authorization of fiancés, spouses, and children, United States citizens, and specialty workers. Promoting legal immigration, additional visas, children with long-term visa holders, military naturalization, modernization, and temporary family visits. They got an awful lot of stuff in here. Access to counsel of certain unaccompanied alien children, employment authorization compliance, legal access to custodial settings, credible fear and protection determinations, publication and operational statistics in U.S. Customs and Border Protection, utilization of parole authorities, accountability of provisional removal proceedings, accountability of voluntary reparations, withdrawal or departure, GAO analysis of immigration judge and asylum officer decision-making regarding asylum, report on counsel on unaccompanied alien children, recalcitrant countries, severability, and budgetary effects. It's a lot. It's a lot. Appropriate committees of Congress, except for the otherwise explicitly provided, the term appropriate committees of the Congress means the Committee of Appropriations of the Senate, the Committee of Judiciary of the Senate, the Committee of Homeland Security, Committee of Appropriations, Judiciary, House of Representatives, Homeland Secretary, and the term Secretary means the Secretary of Homeland Security. Good to know. The Secretary may appoint, without regard to provisions of Section 3309 through 3319 of Title V, United States Code candidates needed for positions such as Refugee, Asylum, International Operations Directorate, Field Operations Directorate, the Service Center Operations Directorate of the U.S., and Citizens and Immigration Services, for which 1. Public notice has been given. 2. Secretary has determined that critical hiring needs exist. 3. The Secretary has consulted with the Director of the Office of Personnel Management regarding A. The positions of the Secretary plans to recruit. B. The quantity of candidates Secretary is seeking. And C. The assessment of selection policies and the Secretary plans to utilize. Definition of critical hiring need. In this section of the term critical reporting. All of this, do we? I structure hiring authority. looks pretty much the same as the last. Reemployment of civilian retirees to meet exceptional employment need. Annuitants not treated as employees for purposes of retirement benefits. That's why this thing is so damn long. There's so much shit in here. Hiring waivers. It's not just about things going on in Ukraine and the border. It's about a hell of a lot more. It's about a hell of a lot more that they're trying to actually get passed through Congress, because you don't want to be continuously called a racist for absolutely no reason. You should want to move. You should want to move this money in and around the world, so that way, things get better. What the fuck? You seriously believe me? If you believe me on that things will get better by spending all this money, I'd like to see your argument on how that will actually work. Because I doubt it. Any individual who receives a waiver under subsection B of section 3, who holds a background investigation in accordance with the standards required to access top secret or top secret sensitive compartmented information shall be subject to the appropriate background investigation, administration of polygraph examination. The Commission of U.S. Customs and Border Protection is authorized to administer the polygraph examination to an applicant for an employee who is eligible for or receives a waiver under subsection B of section 3 of information is discovered prior to the completion of the background investigation that results in the determination that the polygraph examination is necessary to make a final determination regarding the suitability and employment of continued employment, as the case may be. The Anti-Border Corruption Act of 2010 is amended by adding at the end of the following of the new section a reporting requirement. Not later than 1 year after the date of enactment of the section, that annually thereafter for 3 years, the Commission of U.S. Customs and Border Protection shall submit a report to Congress that includes, with respect to the reporting period, the number of waivers granted and denied under Section 3, B. 2, the reasons for any denials of the waiver. 3, the percentage of applicants who are hired after receiving the waiver. And 4, the number of instances the polygraph was administered to an applicant who initially received a waiver and the results of such polygraph. 5, an assessment of the current impact of the polygraph waiver program. 6, additional authorities needed by U.S. Customs and Border Protection to better utilize the polygraph waiver program or its intended goal. And 7, any disciplinary action taken against law enforcement officers hired under the waiver authority authorized Section 3B. Additional information. The first report submitted under subsection A shall include the analysis of the methods of employment suitability and a recommendation regarding whether a test referred to in paragraph 1 should be adopted by the U.S. Customs. Cal report. Not later than 5 years after the date of enactment in the section of every 5 years thereafter, the Comptroller General of the United States shall conduct a review of disciplinary misconduct, derogatory records of all individuals hired using the waiver authority, subsection 3, to determine the rates of disciplinary actions taken against individuals hired using such waiver authority as compared to the individuals hired after passing the polygraph as required under subsection A of the section. B, to address any other issues related to discipline by the U.S. Customs and Border Protection and submit the Committee of Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs to of the Senate and the Committee of Homeland Security of the House of Representatives, a report that appropriately protects sensitive information and describes the results of the review conducted under paragraph 1. Sunset. The requirement under the section shall terminate on the date in which the third report required by subsection A is submitted. Okay. Alternatives to detention and improvements to training the U.S. Border Patrol. As you can see, I'm getting disturbed with the whole. This is a lot of fucking bullshit. It's a lot of bullshit. Course requirements, assessment, chapter for modernizing notices to appear. Should or if elected by alien in writing. Paragraph in the matter preceding the clause. Yeah, ain't nobody gonna read all this. Authority to prepare the issue notices to appear. Asylum processing at the border. Provisional non-custodial removal proceeding. Exceptions, accountability limitations, timing, commencement. Yeah, there's so much. This is ridiculous. It's like page 90, and they're hitting up the border for them to go all the way through page 3, Senate PAYGO scorecards, budgetary effects, other matters. In any provision of this act, any amendment made by this act, the applicant. See, seriously, it still needs to go through. It needs to go through a lot more than what you actually see. That's a big deal. It's a big deal for what it is. To actually see 370 pages come forward and all the money that they want to spend in Ukraine, all the money that they'd like to spend at the southern border, has to be all tied together in one big massive bill. And if that wasn't enough, it wasn't enough to actually see all of that and realize how much money they were spending on all these projects. There just so happens to be a massive amount of other things that are tied to this particular bill. They do this over and over again. Over and over again. This is exactly what happens to every single bill that hits the floor. Is they go ahead and they try, squeezing every last penny that they possibly can out of everything that they do. And to see them continuously doing this, and we just like we're allowing it. And there's this is nonstop ridiculousness of massive amount of money going to the wrong things. And then they're going to sit there and they're going to open the border like it's nothing, allowing people to come across. And we're going to fund that too. We're going to fund that too. Because, with the United States of America, don't you know, we just got so much money that, we can take care of everybody's issues, everybody's problems without even trying. And that's exactly what's going to actually happen. It's so bad and so horrible. But, here we are. I've watched this number go from 1 to 2 to 1 to 2 to 1 to 2 of people watching. It's like, go back down to 1. And then somebody pops in and they're like, oh, it's just Cool Frog talking. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's all I'm doing. I'm just sitting here talking some random bullshit. I'm not talking about anything of importance. But, when it comes down to it, it is very, very important. And people just simply don't give a fuck. People simply just don't give a fuck, which is horrible. for what it is on the millions and millions of dollars, billions and trillions, whatever it be, that we're throwing at all of these um, insignificant causes. I really seriously find us throwing money at Ukraine, at Israel, at Taiwan to really be something that we don't need to worry about. What we do need to worry about is all of those military-aged men coming across our southern border. They don't care about that. They don't care about that. They don't give one. They don't give two shits less. All right, y'all. We're at a couple hours almost. For what it is, you can see that there's a new thumbnail that was created for tonight for this show. I'm going to try using it a little bit more often and doing some random things here on YouTube. Call them YouTube exclusives because I have the tendency to sit on the Rumble side of things and do things there. So just to kind of try keeping YouTube active, I'm going to see if I can't do a little bit more to continue to do just when you're shadow banned or hidden in the algorithm. It's hard to find it. I know. And that's the problem. That's the problem. It's super hard to find it. It really seriously been shadow banned to the extreme, on top of all the other things that had occurred within community in itself. I'm going to continue to do my thing as much as I possibly can for what it is. I really don't get paid. I really don't get paid anywhere that I do any of this. I mean, I get paid so many. The few pennies that I make over on Rumble really doesn't equate to anything for anything for what that is. And I get over here on the YouTube side that I really hadn't been using, which you can make a little bit more. You can make a little bit more if you get the views, if you can get the people to watch, get the super chats to come in. All of that can be all good and all, but it's really hard to sit here and know that there's a way to potentially make money and not attempt to do it. It's really, it goes against anything that anybody's really for. It really does. It just kind of like, wow, why am I not using it? Why am I not using it? I need to use it. I need to liven it back up. See if I can't get it, out there to the masses of people. I know it still says that I have over 1,000 subscribers. If you haven't and you're actually catching this on the replay, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to try doing a lot more. Hit up the Rumble side of things. You can actually look up Cool Frog the same way you see it spelled on the screen, and go subscribe over there as well. I do a lot more, and I talk a lot more about things that I can't talk about here, which is the reason that I have been doing the thing on Rumble. Just seriously, like, I need to try doing more here. This time frame of 4 till 6 o'clock in the morning, no, that's not going to be a normal thing. That's not going to be a normal thing. It was just that I just so happened to be awake, so I'm like, okay, fine. Kind of an important article for what it was to kind of go through some of the 370 pages that they had thrown at us for this bill that looks like they're really not going to do much of good for us as U.S. citizens, but more for anybody and everybody else. It's grossly disturbing. I don't like it, but whatevs. again, if you can do me the one favor and like everything, share everything, do all of that, do all those YouTube and Rumble like things, or YouTube like things for me, or whatever. I'm not on Rumble right now. I really do appreciate it. Those, at least it shows you are watched, be it even by lurkers who might be at work or just going through morning routines. Yeah, and exactly. So I mean, it's not something that I haven't streamed at this time of the morning in a while. It's been a bit, so not expecting people to even realize that I was even live for what it was. There was no forewarning. There's no forewarning. I doubt anybody got notifications of any sort. And I started earlier than what I had myself scheduled for. Just because I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Let's try this. Let's see what we can do. I would totally suggest everybody go back and watch the last 2 hours and kind of listen to the millions, billions, trillions of dollars that are being spent in all these other places. Do that. If you can't, you don't want to, whatever. If you're the replay crew, just smash that like button, please. All right, y'all. I'm gonna actually take off for now. I will see you tonight for a regular episode of Stick with Cool Frog over on Rumble. For sure. That's at 9 o'clock Mountain Standard Time that I run a regular show. I usually try keeping myself around 2 hours, if not more, for what it is. I do kind of have a show set up, and there should be some new fun stuff that should come out today. So there will be something for sure. I'll try coming back here on the YouTube side a little bit more often and see if I can't, produce something. All right, y'all. Thank you again. I will talk to you soon. Love y'all. Later.